Hey, guys.
Hey,
Jordan,
Hey.
welcome back.
Yeah, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Yeah, this is fun. We were just talking the other day about how you were one of our very early on in our podcast interviews, and we're grateful to
nice.
have you back on.
Well, it's good to be back, and I'm excited to catch up with you guys, chat about all things going on.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of crazy. So that episode came out, it was episode 20. That episode came out on May 20th, 2021. And then it just so happens we're talking to you today. Yeah.
Yeah.
Meant to be today, I guess.
Meant to be.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming back on.
Oh, my pleasure.
So for the commies out there listening, what's up? It's Comics and Chronic. Anthony here. Cody here, Jake here. Coming back to the podcast, Jordan Blum. First time we had him on, we talked a lot about MODOK. Today we're going to talk about Minor Threats from Dark Horse, especially the newest volume of it, The Fastest Way Down. A lot of cool stuff happening. You have your own comic book universe, co-written by Patton Oswalt, art by Scott Hepburn. I love it, and I'm glad you came back. So welcome back, Jordan.
Oh, thanks. Very good to be back. And it's very surreal that this comic that we created, we were like, we're going to get 4 issues and they'll never let us make a comic again. We've been able to expand and do some spin-offs. We've got a lot of big stuff coming up that we even haven't announced yet. So it's been incredible to watch this thing grow.
Nice. What was the inspiration behind this kind of comic?
The inspiration was we were coming out of MODOK and
You guys like villains, huh?
Yeah. We love our C-list villains. We're like, we haven't done enough. We did a TV show and a comic. Clearly, we haven't gotten it out of our system yet. Patton had done some comics previous, and he had this Batman story he had always wanted to do that was, when the Joker kind of takes over Gotham and is holding it hostage, and Batman is kind of trying to find him. It kind of makes life hell for the little guys. And I thought that was such a great premise. And then I had been kind of on my own working on various projects that were very much about these kinds of characters. And I wanted to tell a story about like a second generation supervillain and being trapped in the family business. So we kind of melded these ideas together and decided to do our own thing. Because Dark Horse had approached us about doing an original book. And yes, we thought it was going to be 4 issues and then that was it. And we'd be cut off from comics for forever. So we packed in every idea we ever had and, for this universe into this book that we co-created with Scott Hepburn, who we'd worked with on MODOK. And just tried to write the comic we always wanted to read. And that was kind of the genesis of it. And we never save anything for the sequel or plan that far ahead. And we just want to tell the best possible story. So we were like, let's just tell the story about this supervillain who wants out, gets pulled in for one last job because it's her way out of this world. And, watch her and these other C-listers go on this caper trying to track down this much more important, much more dangerous supervillain.
Nice.
Yeah. Playtime, a much cooler version of Toyman.
Yes. I like gimmicky supervillains, and we were trying to figure out, what we're going to do with her. So we kind of mixed Toyman with like Forge a little bit, and that she can build, it's super complex things very quickly. But they always come out as toys because of her mom's gimmick and her, psychologically being kind of missing out on her childhood. So her powers can only manifest as toys and toy weapons.
I like that. I like that her trauma played a role in what she makes.
For sure. Also, one thing I want to discuss off the top, the title, Minor Threats, punk band? Is it like based off of either of you guys? Like what?
It's kind of just a coincidence. Like I
Okay.
I'd known a little bit about them, but it was more, I think originally we were going to call it Bottom Feeders, and that was clear. So we're trying like what feels like kind of a C-list villain thing, and Minor Threats kind of made sense. And then I think now after several series later, we still get like, are you guys? They're going to sue you, aren't they? Or copyright infringement. We're like, no, there's an S at the end. But so far, I think they are very cool, and no one has come after us. But we've used some of the music and the promos and stuff. It works really well with the book.
Nice.
Hell yeah.
That's awesome.
So if the listeners out there, if you haven't read Minor Threats, the story is filled with a lot of analogs of comic book characters, or a lot of amalgams, let's say. How does that creative process work? Like, do you just rattle off like a ton of those and then kind of narrow it down to ones? Like, I know a lot of them seem silly on the surface, but what I really liked about this comic was that they all had some like real problems and real life drama, and they felt like real people. They weren't just like these silly characters.
Sure. Well, I think we leaned heavier into the analogs for kind of the Insomniac and the Stickman. We wanted you to think about these big, summer crossovers where a Batman and a Joker, get into some war, and it's going to be a 10-issue series. And we're like, okay, that's happening in the background. That's our framing device. Now we're going to pull the camera over here and showcase these characters that are kind of goofy. They're very much, Silver Age, Bronze Age villains that were only intended to like show up for one issue and have some silly gimmick, or they're like, we pitch it as like the characters who like get webbed up or tied to a telephone pole in the cold open before the hero goes after the real villain. So we wanted them to kind of feel like that, feel like they maybe their glory days were a past time period. But what would lead you to put on a snake costume and be like, this is my life, this is what I'm doing from here on out? And it's like, clearly trauma. Nothing good leads you down this path. So we wanted you to kind of be like, oh, that's a Riddler kind of character, that's like a Sabretooth, like I know who that is. And then we wanted to like be like, no, what if these people had really complex backstories and traumas and things that led them to this, and they really just want to escape this, they're trapped in this life, and made them more tragic, kind of villains than you're used to thinking about when you kind of think about Kangaroo Man or the Spot or Captain Cold or something like that. So that was kind of the impetus for that. And then we wanted it. Obviously we want you to think of Justice League, for the heroes and stuff, but that's because they're not stars of the story. They're kind of on the outskirts of the story of telling, and I think you need that to kind of get the audience kind of situated, so then you can then go do your thing. And that was kind of always the plan.
Nice.
It was awesome. I when I was reading it, there were a lot of elements from some of my like favorite comic books that I felt were in it, whether intentional or not. But it felt awesome because like there's a lot of Black Hammer vibes, especially with Playtime following in her mother's footsteps. As far as the villain bar, it reminded me of Ed Brubaker's Sleeper, and there's a specific villain bar in that they go to. So they're local man vibes. It seemed to have a lot of these cool, just different varieties of tones going into it.
Yeah, I think like definitely Astro City, Black Hammer were big. I think these are all, again, like you said, analogs, and also kind of from the ground up superhero world creation. So we looked at like, how do you world build from these books, but so that you can get into your story, so that you can feel like the world's lived in, that there's a history here, because we wanted it to feel that way. We wanted it to feel like we described Redport as this is a part of a city that's endured 60 years of superhero continuity, but they don't have damage control. No one cleaned up the next day. So like there's and Scott was so good at this, of like adding like killer plant husks from some sort of poison ivy thing happened, but it's never commented on there. Or we have Broken Time Boulevard, and we have the kaiju bones and the buildings built out of them.
Yeah, the slums and the kaiju was cool.
Yep,
I like that.
I like that.
Yeah. So we wanted to just kind of make it feel lived in, and that this has kind of been there for years.
Nice. Yeah, no, it's super cool. The also just the characters all have so much heart. Like everyone is super, like from the first page, that first bar scene, when you're getting the introductions to everybody, there's just like so much heart in the way that you're getting her like perception of each villain she interacts with, and it's just really great, well-developed characters.
They're also pathetic that you feel bad for a lot of them.
Yeah. Well, that was what we wanted to do, is that like you're going to see issue 1 through Frankie's point of view. She's our way in. It's really her story. And it was just out of kind of the necessity of how you write comics. And we had 28 pages for that first issue. we really wanted you to invest in Frankie, but we're like, well, what about all the other characters? We're like, oh, we'll switch narrators every issue so then you can see the world through their eyes. And suddenly, a character like Brain Tease, who just seems like this arrogant, weirdo, is the character that you care about. And you understand why they would all throw in with Frankie and agree to this sort of suicide mission. It's on the riskiest night of the year for supervillains, as the heroes are kind of hitting the streets hard and trying to find the Insomniac. They're willing to risk their lives to go find Stickman, who's also a huge threat. So why would these characters agree to this? And it kind of made it a fun way to switch every issue and go, well, who is this person? And why would Scalpel do this? Oh, she's, this self-made mob doctor who owns all these things, and she's losing her kind of little underground hospitals and stuff, and this is her only way to stop that from being closed down. Like, everyone had their own reason to be there, and it was really fun to kind of discover that issue to issue.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Were there any characters that you came up with that you were like, nah, we can't include them,
or didn't get cleared by Dark Horse?
No, I mean, we took it just kind of self-imposed. We took a long time trying to figure out Stickman. We were like, what's this gimmick here? You can't be too jokery, but it's got to kind of feel a little bit like, and we're like, oh, what if he wants to simplify everything? We thought of the design and kind of pitched to Scott, and that one took probably the longest. Everything else was like super quick. It was just like, I think we had them in the back of your head as you read comics your whole life. You're like kind of filing these ideas away, and then the minute you're like, oh my god, let's do this and this and this, and even the pitching that bar, that club they go to with the higher end supervillains in 2, it was like, okay, I want a character here who feels like a weirdo Chester Gould, Dick Tracy villain. Like, what if the guy just has a thumb for a face? Stuff like that. Where like nothing's too stupid or weird, because the way comics were made, it was some writers like, who the fuck is Spider-Man gonna fight? This gibbon, that's an animal I've never seen before. The gibbon, he's fighting the gibbon. And you're like, I wanted to have that kind of like, there's no wrong idea here for a character in this. And it gets, I think issue 3 is coming out in a few weeks, and that has a bunch of retired elderly supervillain, and one of them is called the Dino Sorcerer, and
Nice.
he can only open portals to the Jurassic era, so he can just open portals for raptors to stick their heads through and bite people. That's all he can do. But we're like, this is a fun name thing, and we're like, great idea, put it in. So
That's amazing.
I like not holding back with this, because that's what makes some of my favorite comics, really sing, is how like, Jack Kirby had a bad day and created MODOK, clearly, like we love that stuff.
No, it is crazy how comic booky this story feels, but still manages to be so grounded. Like everything, like the characters you're talking about and just the story itself. I feel like it's a hard line to balance, like just like going off of like no characters feel like what I would call like a ripoff. Like everything feels so fresh and original. And I feel like you guys kicked ass with Minor Threats. So I want to ask, like in this new volume. So like, yeah, the first Minor Threats, that volume, it feels like such a complete story. It feels like when that's done, like, yeah, it's a comic book, so we could expect other things to happen. But what's going on in this new volume with Frankie?
Sure. Well, I think what you're talking to of them feeling grounded, even though they're dressed up as snakes and whatever, was that to me, the best kind of comic book stuff is when you kind of subgenre it a little bit. So we're like, this has to feel like a Coen Brothers crime caper. Like these are noir characters, and they're going to talk like noir characters, and they're going to have tragic, backstories like noir characters. And I think that helped us go, they're going to look like this, but they're going to sound like this. And then that helped ground it. So like I said, volume 1 was very much a Coen Brothers thing. We pulled a little bit from the Warriors, kind of survive the night, get across the city.
Yeah.
So those were big influences on that. And Frankie sort of levels up at the end of volume 1, where she kind of goes from being this joke to like, she just cleared the chessboard. The most powerful hero's gone, and the most dangerous villain is gone, and there's like a power vacuum. And on kind of, the journey of issue or the first volume, she realized she's good at this. Like there's no running from it. Like this is the thing she was kind of made to do. And it's the idea of stepping up and unifying these sort of C-listers into an organized crime family and becoming the queen pin essentially of Redport. That's where we left her. And so when we were looking at volume 2, we were like, I don't want to repeat ourselves. We don't want to do another caper. We don't want to do another, Frankie's level up. Let's level the story up with her. So we looked at things like Goodfellas and
Nice.
Godfather Part 2 and these kind of more sprawling crime epics, the rise and falls of these leaders and these people in power.
Nice.
And we decided, okay, let's lean into that for this volume because that's where she is in the story. And also we wanted to have a whole different vibe. So we come into volume 2 and Frankie, she sees power. She's running things with Scalpel. She's leading this double life as this kind of hero of her community, giving back, being with her daughter. And she's not used to kind of having this power, and it's like uncomfortable with her. And Scalpel's trying to legitimize her and think bigger. And and Frankie's still kind of dealing with the trauma of killing the Insomniac. So on top of all of that, this team of sidekicks come to Redport, and they're not buying the ending that the lie that was created between Frankie and the Continuum, that Brain Tease took out the Insomniac. They know someone else really killed him, so they're going to solve his murder and kind of make a name for themselves. Which means if they uncover this mystery, her entire empire crumbles. So they're coming after her. And there's some other kind of plot lines. We really felt like Snake Stalker got a little shorted just because we ran out of issues. He didn't really get his. So we continued his story with Reptilian, who was the guy who was carrying into the bar in the first issue. Lover, and who's like, no one's telling me what happened to him. That got covered up. Like, I want to find out what really happened to him. So he kind of aligns with the action, this kind of psychotic group of teens, and everyone is kind of on Frankie's trail, and you're kind of seeing if she can maintain this power or is she going to kind of fall. And that was the story we wanted to tell with them.
Nice.
Yeah. It's cool. Also that you're like talking about like a comic book world, but all of your influences are like these very dramatic, like Goodfellas, Godfather Part 2. The first one, like just the way you're talking about the transition, it feels like the very transition of Michael Corleone at the end of Part 1 into Part, you know what I mean?
Totally. He was reluctant to kind of take the crown, and then you see kind of the darkness that he gives into to fully become that Godfather. And I think that's what Frankie's struggling with in this one. And we get to really dig into that, and we meet some new characters. And even when we were trying to figure out who's narrating, who are we going to see the first issue from, we talked about that opening of Goodfellas, where there's this like Ray Liotta's character as a kid, when he sees these people who are these big deals in the neighborhood and how everyone respects them. And we're like, oh, let's see Frankie from a new character's point of view. So we know her new world and how the rest of the town kind of sees her. So a lot of that just kind of influenced how to get into the story and what to tell. And we have a little bit of a love triangle. Frankie and Scalpel have developed a relationship. We should never really mix business and pleasure. So that's kind of a ticking clock. And she's starting to spend more time with her ex-husband to be there more for her daughter. And we wanted to kind of I always like secret identities and stuff that's kind of fallen out of favor a little bit in comics, but I always loved seeing characters juggle both lives. I mean, that's why I love Spider-Man so much. It's so integral to the character, but I'd never seen it from a villain point of view. So we wanted to give Frankie that, where she has these two parts where, she's in the streets, almost killing these heroes and other villains. And then she goes home and spends time with her daughter and has these really sweet, tender moments. Like, how can this be the same person? And we wanted to kind of investigate that.
That's awesome.
Nice.
That's cool. I feel like that also kind of echoes what was going on in MODOK, where he was a villain. And then we also got to see like his family life. And this guy had some like normalcy to what was going on underneath all that stuff.
Yeah, I love that dichotomy in those characters. And yeah, villains, I feel like we barely just kind of touched that, that world.
Is the writing process like seamless between you and Patton when you guys are like, how do you do it as far as like actual, like almost like storyboard? Like, how do you decide who writes what, or does it just, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well,
Like the actual
usually
writing process.
we'll break the whole thing together. So we'll kind of beat it out together, scene by scene, page by page. Sometimes we'll just write it together, and other times we'll just kind of, you take that scene, I'll take this scene, pass them back and forth, and then by the time it's all put together, it's kind of like everyone's worked on everything so much. It is pretty seamless. And then we'll talk it out with Scott and pitch ideas, and he'll pitch ideas back and change things. And we really try to write towards him, and we would see things start to come back, like the way he would draw these backgrounds or splash pages. So we tried to make every
backgrounds are crazy. He fits a lot into a page.
Seriously.
A panel. It's impressive. There's so many little Easter eggs and details in the background of each panel.
He does so much world building. It's insane.
Yeah, it's great.
We started letting that influence what we were doing. And also he would do these, like, you could only do in comics pages, we would call them. Like in issue 1, it's the one where you're looking at Reptilian and you're seeing the little boxes of how, the Insomniac kicked his ass. And then, or the ones where Scalpel is trying to figure out what's wrong with Frankie, and you kind of see her point of view diagnosing Frankie. So you see like inside her, and her guts are telling her what's wrong and stuff. So we're like, let's keep doing more and more. So we started doing double page spreads for him and this and that. So a lot of it is just like, what's the coolest thing we can give Scott to draw, and how can we do something that you could only do in comics that I've never seen before. And that's a lot of the writing process too.
Nice. Yeah. Nice. The art is stellar, and it's like really cool, which with everything that you're talking about, it's like still like it's somehow fresh and new, but you can see a lot of like tones of comics past, like a lot of, I don't know. It just has like a very retro feel, if that makes sense. Like you talking about how a lot of these characters were influenced by the Golden Age and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely Ian, our colorist. He and Scott work very closely together. And, we talked about anything that's set kind of that should feel Bronze Age, Silver Age-y, like he'll change the colors, he'll flatten them so it looks like the comics printed of that time. Even, in modern times, it still, I think, feels much more like a traditional superhero book than kind of heavily computerized gradient shadowing. Like he still does like these flat colors.
Oh, for sure.
And I think it really helps with like what we're doing. Because we always talked about it. We're like, there is this meta sense, right, to the book of like it's playing on comic history a little bit, where these are Bronze Age, Silver Age characters, and we were talking about how jarring it must have been if you were, the Spot or something in the 80s, and then all of a sudden Frank Miller and Alan Moore come, and it's like, wait, they're killing people? We do this now? Like, what happened? Like, it must have been shocking to these villains that like the Joker or any of these characters now, is just murdering people. And like, what happened to these innocent days? And we wanted that to sort of be who these characters were, who were like, I don't like where things are going. Like this isn't how things used to be. And we wanted the death of Kid Dust to be this kind of turning point, this like death of Kennedy, end of an innocent era thing, where it's like, you can think they're never going to go back, And that's what, and Frankie's now moved into this world where she's sort of bridging the old ways of her mom with this kind of more dangerous, violent new world, and she's kind of straddling both worlds.
Nice. So speaking of straddling both worlds, so I know you also you work in TV as well. Mm-hmm. Is there any plans to expand Minor Threats outside of comics?
Stay tuned.
Ooh, okay.
Ooh, nice.
Can't talk about anything yet, but but I'll say this: it's a funny thing because Dark Horse Productions, who we worked with, is fantastic, and they immediately, when the pitch came in, they're like, let's go take it out. Let's go pitch it. And we were very much like adamant, like, no, I don't want to think about this as a pilot or a movie or anything else. I want to write the best comic version of this. And if I'm thinking about pitching and this and that, it's going to ruin it. So we actually like told them, no, wait until the full comic is done. Then I'll change my brain to be in TV film mode, and we'll have more discussions. So we really wanted this to be as pure as possible. We wanted this to be
nice,
the best fucking comic we could make, instead of like storyboards for a pilot,
Nice. I totally respect that.
Yeah. Which like totally plays into what you were talking about, writing these pages that are comic only.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the format is so unique. I think you can tell we absolutely love captions and being able to jump into a character's brain and hear their point of view, or juxtaposing those with images. And I don't know, there's just like page turns, writing towards that. Again, double page splashes, like having Scott he did in that time bubble thing. He did that double page splash where it looks like a board game almost, where they're running through panels. And he had one thing that looked like unfinished art, and it's one of those things where it's like it just makes sense in the comic, or characters look like Archie characters. We were just able to play with format. Even like if you look at the corner boxes we did, they would change every issue to reflect what was happening in the issue. So I think their faces were normal in the first one. The second one, they're like beat up because the Insomniacs on the cover having kicked their asses. The third one, they're all different multiverse versions of themselves. Like I think Pigeon Pete's an actual pigeon, like cartoon. And the last one, they're all just skeletons because it was our big finale that we knew a lot of people would not survive. So I love like even those little details of like, what can we do in the corner box to help tell the story? That was really fun.
How does it feel to like write these characters that you love and that you can tell people are going to love and then kill them off?
Well, it's funny. I mean, you have things plotted out and things change too. I don't think we were expecting Frankie's heel turn to be as severe as it was. But it just felt right for where the character was. And like I said, we fell in love with Snake Stalker. He was one of our favorite characters. And we felt an anger that we didn't get to finish his story and that his story got cut short. So we put that anger into, his partner, who's like, what the fuck? I was in the hospital. This guy says goodbye to me. He's going after Stickman. And then the next thing I know, he's gone and no one will talk about it. And that became a story because we were like, we did it. Not that we did him dirty, but it's like, he deserves more. He should hit that death should count more. So that led to this whole storyline for volume 2. So I think that's really fun to have those emotional ties where you're like, no, he deserves justice. Let's see it happen in a new story.
Nice. And that feels so organic too. Like you want to know that what's happening with that. That's really cool. I wanted to also bring up the alternates because that's also part of the Minor Threats universe, but albeit in a different way. I love the alternates. Tim Seeley joined you guys on that. Ooh, and the art in that book also is incredible. Like the way it switches up between characters and what's going on. Can you talk a little bit about the alternates?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been friends with Tim for a while as I developed one of his comics into a show that never went somewhere else, but we became pals. And he came to us, after the first one came out, and he's like, can I pitch you guys like kind of a concept? And we're like, absolutely. And, he came in and we built it all together. And, Tim was like, I want to play with the horror characters, kind of the Vertigo characters of the alternates and we were talking about how jarring, right, it would be if you were Animal Man or Swamp Thing. And 1 minute it's like the nice, innocent, this innocent era. And then you're dragged into this adult world where you go from a swamp creature to a god. And then we're like, well, wouldn't that be weirder if you got kind of rebooted back and all of a sudden you had tasted what it was like to be a god? Now you're back to this like 2-dimensional superhero world where you're a superhero all of a sudden again. and that was kind of the genesis of that story. It's a love letter. We love the Vertigo books of the early 90s. And, but we were like, what if that happened to you? What if there was a support group for other heroes who had been rebooted? These C-list heroes who sacrificed themselves, went over into this other dimension where they lived these complicated lives and their powers and consciousness were expanded. And then they were ripped back to their old lives where they're just a dad and a superhero. And they were kind of missing that old life like a drug. And then that reality comes to our world in the form of a drug, and will they relapse and kind of give into it, or will they figure out where it's coming from and be heroes and save the day? And we wanted it to be a story about addiction and unlocking your true potential. And, because when you hear a lot of addicts, they talk about like, I've never felt better. I feel like my best self when I'm this before, the crash. And we wanted that to be kind of a superhero story. So that was where that came from. And to me, it kind of fit what the MO of the Minor Threats universe was, which is like, let's tell stories from perspectives we've never seen before. And, I think I've never heard a character, complain about being rebooted. So I thought that would be really fun. And got to create these amazing characters. And then we wanted, Chris's art felt like a lot of the Vertigo comics of that era. And then Tess's art felt like the covers to those books from that era. And we really wanted the two styles to kind of juxtapose against each other and feel very different. And I think that was, again, another thing you could only do in comics, where we have two different art styles representing two different worlds. And we had a blast working with both of them.
I really love the characters in this book too, like especially Crab Louie. He's got to be a favorite of mine.
Well, I got good news for you. Gail spoiled it. Gail Simone is doing a Crab Louie one shot for us.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. I'll be buying that for sure. Okay.
Yeah. We were very excited. A, she's one of my favorite writers, and B, we're like, Crab Louie lives. More Crab Louie.
Yeah, I really liked his story. Also, okay, so I guess we see him in the background of the alternates and minor threats. He's just there, Barfly. He's getting his own series too?
Yeah, well, his name is actually Shit Eater.
Shit Eater.
But we couldn't call the book that. But he's referred to as Shit Eater. Kyle Starks and Ryan Brown are doing it, who is like a dream team of comedy writers and artists. But if you've read Kyle's stuff, it can be really heartbreaking and emotional, besides being hilarious. And I think people will be shocked that it's basically a minion, like a mutant minion coming of age story of being like a henchman who no longer has anyone to hench for and is trying to figure out his place in the world. And, but also he's named Shit Eater, and he's a punk rock fly. So that's coming out in July, and that one ties, I think, a lot more into the main books than the alternates did. You'll see Frankie pop up. You'll see the continuum. It's much more entrenched, I think, in what's going on in Redport. But it's so funny, and Ryan's art is incredible because the character can't talk. He's silent. So Ryan will do sound effects that are like, badass jump, oh shit, but it's the sound effects of like what he's doing when he's jumping or doing, so he found a way to like create a language for the character, and it's really cool. I mean, you'll hear some of his VO, but he can't talk to other characters, so Ryan created sound effects to communicate what he's feeling.
That's so funny.
Is that also a one shot, or is that a series?
No, that's a 4-issue series, and it's going to launch in July. We're going to have some cool stuff for it at Comic-Con. There's some merch stuff involving him that is a little too early to talk about, but there's a lot of Shit Eater stuff coming away. People just really love the character. He's just a background character Scott created, but we all loved him, and we're like, who is he? I want to know more about this character, and it just led to the series.
So you said when you started writing it, you wanted to write it without a sequel in mind and wanted to write the single best comic you could. And now this world is growing. Do you have like a vision of where you want it to go? Do you have like an ending to this universe? Or are you just going to keep having, like, are you just having such a good time you want to keep expanding and just see where it goes?
Yeah, I don't think we have an ending to the universe, but I think, Frankie's story has a resolution, and we're working on building, I think, towards that. It's definitely a rise and fall, and then we'll see where she ends up. And we have ideas for other characters, but a lot of it is like very organic, where a character like the Searcher was our Superman analog that we had in the first book, and then she ended up being a much bigger part to the alternates and goes through a little bit of a crisis there, and then she's going to pop up in a few other of the spin-offs, and then where that character went from writer to writer, and it ended up putting her in a place where suddenly she made a lot of sense to another story. It was very organic in a way that I imagine, like, not that I'm ever comparing myself to this, but like the Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko early Marvel stuff, where it's like Hulk's over there now, he's in Fantastic Four, this one, okay, now he's back. Oh, but something that happened in your story was really cool, so I'm going to add that to here. And it was very, it was very organic. But I think, like Frankie's story, we talked a little bit about, early on of where we wanted her to go next. And then obviously as we were getting towards the end of volume 2, we had much bigger discussions of like what ultimately is what are we building towards? So once we got to volume 2, we started to think a little bigger, but I think the spontaneity of a lot of the stuff is really fun too.
From a creator perspective, it sounds like, I mean, it's your universe. You, Pat and Scott, like you have so much freedom where I know in comics, if you're working for the big two, obviously you're beholden to like canon and characters, but it sounds so cool that it just sounds like you're having fun. Like you could do whatever you want, basically. Or are there any limits that Dark Horse is like, maybe don't do that?
They haven't said no yet. And, besides Gale, there's some insane names who asked to come play that we'll be announcing soon for a few more one shots. And then beyond that, we keep getting pitches in. And, I think a lot of them are stories, superhero stories people have always wanted to tell, but maybe it wouldn't work in Marvel or it wouldn't work in DC. You can't break the characters that way or do this or that. And I think that's kind of where ours was born out of. So we're always loving that. And, we work a little bit to like make them connect, but ultimately we just want really good stories. Like I think you could strip Frankie out of the alternates and even the Searcher, and I think that book works on its own. And that's kind of really important to us, is that it's not too bogged down in continuity, because I really hate when people are like, does this count? It's like, was the story good? Who fucking cares? Like, I'd rather just read and we tell people, write your 4 issues if you're telling your full story, and then if it's successful, we'll do more. But like, don't think about how it sets up the next big thing in the Minor Threats universe. We have our main book. It's going to tell the big story that we've been tracking. But, for everyone else, like, just tell the coolest thing we've never seen before.
Nice.
Yeah, I really like that. Also, I guess outside of the actual comic, I've seen like on social media, you guys like go out. I'm not. I know Jake's in LA, so maybe he knows better. You go to a specific. I don't know what it's called. It's like a comic shop where you guys do like almost like a mini. Not that it's a con, but you do like signings.
Revenge of, yeah.
Revenge of. There we go.
There's so many great comic stores in LA. Golden Apple, Pulp Fiction. We just did the one at Universal Studios, which was a fantastic signing. But Revenge of is a really special store. Things from Another Planet is the one on Universal. But Revenge of is a really special store. And the guys who own it are also like production designers and build sets and things. So the store, when you walk in, it's like one room feels like a spaceport bar, cantina. Like another one is just like pinball machine. Like it's so well designed. It's such an experience. And we fell in love with the store kind of immediately. And they were like, can we do a Minor Threats release party for the graphic novel? We're like, sure. And let's make it an event. So, we brought in stand-up comedians that Patton knew. A band played, and it was a party, because I feel like sometimes these signings can be like very style, just like, okay, next, great, here you go, thanks for coming into the store, we're done. And we're like, comics should be a party, and it's a great community in LA. So that was very successful. So they were like, let's do a con. So we called all of our friends and we were like, let's just do a one-day thing. And again, because they're production designers, they'll build stages and a step and repeat and for pictures, and like it feels like they'll build full movie sets for the conventions and the signings we do there. So it was a much bigger production. We had panels throughout the day. We had tons of big writers. Rick Remender was there, Charles Soule, Jerry Duggan. We had people kind of in and out. We had friends of mine who Mike McMahon does Lower Decks, and a bunch of other showrunners were there. So we had a Star Trek one, we had a Star Wars panel. It was really fun. Writers of various animation, So we were able to just kind of call in enough favors to make it a worthwhile event that I think had a better lineup than like 90% of the cons I've been to. And we did it all in a few hours.
Hell yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I saw that. I was so jealous. I was like, damn it, I want to be there. It just seemed like such a cool event.
Well, we're doing it again. I think end of October. Really, remember, we haven't locked down the date yet, but we're definitely planning for another one. So it's going to be a yearly thing. So you got to make it out to one of them.
Oh, definitely.
Where is Revenge of?
It's in Glassell Park, kind of Eagle Rock area.
Okay.
It's not too far from Vidiots, which just opened up in that area. It's a really fun area, great restaurants, kind of this up and coming area. And these guys just run such a fun store. They have, pinball tournaments and Magic, a lot of tabletop gaming stuff. It's a real feels like more of a community. Like people just go in there to play pinball all the time. In the middle of our convention, someone's like, "Yo, Colin Farrell's here," and we're like, "What? Did he come to this?" And they're like, "No, he just came in to play pinball. He's just ignoring." It has regulars, and I guess Colin Farrell is a regular pinball player at Revenge of. He has no interest in the comics whatsoever. That's awesome. It's very funny.
You should just dress up as the Penguin and just stand there, play pinball all day.
Yeah, he could sign photographs and everything. So,
Cool.
but yeah, very cool store, and yeah, they did a huge event. It was Kyle Higgins' new book, Moon Man, that he's doing with Kid Cudi. So they did a huge thing there, and they did a whole Q&A with them on the stage and a big signing. And so they're really good at putting on these events.
Nice. Yeah, we had Kyle on recently, actually. We were talking about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any favorite C-listers, since Minor Threats is about so many of those?
Yeah, so I'm a huge Flash guy. So the Rogues was like a big thing for me growing up. The Wrecking Crew, I fucking love. I love anyone who has the dumbest theme that they're committed to. The Royal Flush Gang, where it's you all have to dress up. You're gonna be Wrecking Ball, and you're gonna be a dump truck. Everyone be assigned a thing. I like that kind of stuff. We played with that in the first issue of Volume 2, where we had the Holiday Gang. And they're all themed, and you can tell the Easter Bunny's do I have to fucking put on these ears? Can't really have to commit to this? Can we just do crimes? Do we really have to lean into this gimmick? So I like the idea that if you want to be in the gang, put the fucking ears on.
That's what we told Cody.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you coming on. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, my pleasure. It was so fun hanging with you guys.
Are you working on, other than this universe, or do you have any other projects you're currently hammering away at?
In comics, Pat and I are doing a story for Star Trek 500.
Cool.
Coming out. That got announced. There's, I think we have our hands full comic-wise with Minor Threats. There's so much planned out. And
is there anything in the television works?
Jimmy? TV? Yes. What can I talk about? I'm EPing a show right now that is based on a comic, but I can't talk about that.
Okay.
Pat and I have some stuff in development with some big characters. And,
nice.
I can't really say. It's so early too. It's kind of tough to don't want to
totally understand.
Spoil or jinx anything. But we have our hands in a lot of fun things. We're taking out other comics as pitches, right now, things that we're fans of that we sought out to develop as shows and stuff. So we're always very involved in the crossover between comics and TV and film, and we're lucky that we're friends with a lot of people in that community. We can be like, hey, we want to develop this. And they're like, great, go nuts. So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff that I can't say a word about, so I'm sorry.
No, that's cool. But is there, I guess maybe there's no specific answer, but it seems like you and Patton are just the dynamic duo. A lot of your creative projects you're working together. Is what's the magic that you think makes it work?
I mean, we just speak the same nerd language. We have the shorthand. The same stuff excites us, and I think even in our reading, we're constantly recommending books. He's much better at finding really good indie stuff and horror, and I'm much more, you're checking out this, Superman's really good. You got to check out some of this, more mainstream superhero stuff. So even though we're both big comic readers, I feel like our tastes are sometimes different. So it's really fun to just kind of pull from both of the things that we love. And we're also huge film nerds. So we'll screen stuff all the time and reference scenes and things. It's we have this kind of hive mind of similar loves and passions.
Nice.
Hell yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah,
well, thanks for coming on, Jordan. I feel we covered a lot of ground with Minor Threats. Yeah. And come back again, and you don't have to wait 3 years. Well, you
I'll be back. I'll bring Pat and Scott. We'll do another one of these for sure.
Hell yeah. Nice. It's been a blast.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you guys. This is awesome.
Anytime. All right. Take it easy. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. Seriously. Really appreciate it. Hi, you're listening to Comics and Chronic, and I'm Jake FH.
I'm Cody Cannon.
And I'm Anthony Iannaccio.
And you can tune in every Thursday to hear new episodes of Comics and Chronic.
And make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Comics N Chronic. That's comics, the letter N, Chronic.
We'll see you guys next week.
Woo!
Peace.